In this channel, we have studied a fair share of psychopaths, narcissists, sociopaths, and con men. And in this case, we have a con man that use a certain weakness of women to have these elaborate scams and get a lot, and I mean a lot, of money from them. So let's find out what was this weakness and how can you avoid falling in this kind of scams. Welcome back, my body language buddies. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy, and it would be great if you join us by just liking this video, subscribing, and hitting that bell. Let's get down to it. The details of the case. Scammer 70, dubbed worst boyfriend on the Upper East Side, appears in court accused of conning at least 5 women out of more than almost $2 million in 8 years by posing as wealthy art collector. He told women that he was a wealthy art collector and investor before allegedly scamming them into making hefty investments in his fake companies. He was previously unmasked as a con man by a piece in the New Yorker, which branded him as the worst boyfriend on the Upper East Side. Well, you might be thinking, I don't have that much money to be scammed by a man who asks me for money. And it is not only about money, it is the way he used these manipulation tactics to mesmerize these women into his scam. And this is the point that I want to make, and I will be reading a couple passages of the original New Yorker article, and I will be explaining the manipulation tactics one by one and how can you avoid them. So here we are. The worst boyfriend on the Upper East Side. For decades, a man has romanced New York women, persuading them to invest in questionable business deals. How did he keep running the same scam? And we start with this anecdote. In the summer of 2018, my friend Julia learned that her mother had a new boyfriend. Julia's mom, whom I'll call Rachel, was a septuagenarian nearing retirement who had been amicably divorced from Julia's father for nearly 3 decades. She had signed up for a dating site called Our Time, which catered to an older clientele. At last, the website reads, a dating site that not only understands what it is to be over 50, but also celebrates this exciting chapter of our lives. So in the first place, it was through a dating site. Maybe the dating site itself is not that particular, but so in some occasions that scam was through a dating site. But what is particular about this is that dating site was for people over 50. So it was a very specific niche. And that was the predisposition that women could think that they could find men that were not as dangerous as younger men. Maybe that's a possibility. I'd known Julia for more than 20 years. We met during our freshman year of high school. And for that entire time, her mom had been single. Though she had casually dated, she'd never found anyone to be serious with until she met Nelson Roth. Their first date had been at the Surrey, a luxury hotel, very important location, on East 76th Street, not far from where Rachel lived on the Upper East Side. She took to Nelson instantly, and pay attention to this. He was handsome, with a slim build and a full head of hair despite being in his mid-60s. He started cracking jokes and asking thoughtful questions as soon as they sat down. He was well-dressed in jeans and a crisp white shirt, an outfit suggesting both means and easy confidence. So we have a couple things in here. He was handsome, well, that is a very good advantage. A full head of hair, something that is not that common on men over 60 years old. He started cracking jokes. You know that a man who has a sense of humor is extremely magnetic and sexy, and asking thoughtful questions as soon as they sat down. So he was showing intelligence, the whole package. He was well dressed in jeans and a crisp white shirt. So he was formal but a bit easy confidence, as the article reads. So just the first impression was simply great for this woman. He was in business and, at the moment, in the middle of a major deal. He also told Rachel that he was an art dealer. I highlight those words because it's like you have the two sides of a perfect coin. He was in business and at the same time, he was an art dealer. You have the business side and the artistic side. It's perfect package. She noticed that he wore a Xiaomi watch with a red band on his left wrist, which he flashed frequently. This lack of subtlety wasn't exactly a turn on, but she found Nelson impressive, charming, and above all, tremendously fun. So that was the little bit, was not completely perfect, and that helped him look human. They decided to meet up again and then again, always at the best restaurants. Nelson would treat, and he tipped well. That is a good sign that is a man that is fluent with the language of money, and that gives a very good impression on women. Everyone around town seemed to know him, and he greeted him by name. A doorman at the Carlyle would welcome him in, and the hostess at the hotel bar would usher him to a table. So it's not like it was this unknown man out of the blue. We're going to see also that there was this sense of mystery about him. But the fact that everyone at this upscale restaurants and venues knew him or seemed to knew him, that gave these women a lot of reassurance. Nelson was boisterous, frequently chatting up strangers. He seemed dazzled by the world and by Rachel. And this is important. She recalled him saying that he could spend all day looking at her. After just a few weeks, they were an item. So this was the way to overwhelm the love bombing of the process. When a woman is not accustomed to this kind of, well, perfection or almost perfection in a man. And not only that, they feel secure, they feel safe, they have a great time with a lot of humor. And best of all, they feel love. They feel that they have his attention. That is extremely flattering. And that's one of the things that you have to be very careful about. Nelson was constantly boasting about his various homes, his apartment in London, his house in Saint-Tropez, although he told Rachel that his primary residence was in New York. At 35 East 63rd Street, a mega mansion a block and a half from Central Park that had been converted into luxury apartments. He was tiring of the city, however, and he told Rachel that he felt like settling down somewhere quieter, maybe Connecticut. That word, those words, settling down, that's something that triggers a woman's interest even more. Oh, this is great. Maybe he wants to settle down with me. They talk about looking at homes together. They had been dating for only 2 months or so, but everything in Nelson's life seemed to move at warp speed. And that's another red flag that you have to take very carefully with narcissists and other toxic personalities. They want to rush things. They want to go fast to overwhelm your sense of what's going on. Because that's a way that you can throw all this stimuli to you, and well, you say this is great, and maybe I'm not that comfortable in going fast, but you might imagine that a man that is so accomplished, well, has to do things this fast, and so you have to keep up with him, and that only can be a red flag in many ways. Nelson set up a meeting with a high-end New York City broker, and this is the mystery part that I wanted to talk about. Rachel wondered why they would meet with someone in the city to explore Connecticut real estate, but Nelson insisted that this broker had all the right connections. He also wanted Rachel to go alone to the meeting. He told her not to mention him and to make it seem as if she were looking for real estate for herself. She was puzzled, but she followed his instructions. How does this work? Or why does this work? It's because it's like an adventure. It's the mystery part. I don't know why am I doing this. I'm not sure what Nelson really wants, but I feel this exciting. I'm being given instructions. I'm meeting with this guy about Connecticut real estate. I cannot mention Nelson for some reason that he doesn't want to tell me. So it was this amount of familiarity and mystery at the same time. And that is something incredibly interesting for any woman. So you have to be very careful when you feel like something is too good to be true and you have this mystery and so many things that you really don't know about this man, and assess what you are experiencing with him. If the people who know him, if you really know the people who appear to know him, that is also important. And how close is the people that appear to know him, because maybe a waiter or someone at a hotel knows him. But what about friends? What about family? What about a brother, a sister? That is way more important. Maybe he doesn't want to introduce you to his family yet, but he should at least talk about them, have them in the conversation. That's something that you can look for in this kind of situations. One evening, Rachel found Nelson distraught. He needed to make an important purchase, but his broker was off the grid, and it being a Friday night, he wouldn't be able to get the cash from the bank. He needed $7,000. Rachel didn't have the cash on hand, but her daughter happened to. Nelson, overjoyed, told Rachel that if she lent him the cash, he'd give her the money back on Monday plus an extra $500. Spoiler alert, she never saw that money that Monday. Julia, her daughter, had just had knee surgery and was in a foul mood. She'd heard her mother talk about Nelson and had never had a particularly good feeling about him. You know how people close to us, they have this radar on all the time. They are not overwhelmed of all those gifts and jokes and stimuli that the narcissist or the manipulator shower you with. So they can see through many of those facades better than you. So you'd better try to listen when someone, they don't really believe this person, they don't buy into their narrative. It's important to stop and think if there could be a red flag in those remarks by your loved ones, by those close to you. Now she was outraged that he would ask to borrow money and was stunned that her mother didn't see it the same way. But Rachel insisted, and so reluctantly, Julia handed over the cash. On Monday, Julia didn't get her money back. Nelson kept promising to get it to her, but day after day passed and still nothing. Each day, he had a new explanation. Oh, that is usual with toxic personalities. Eventually, he told Rachel that he was in the hospital for some heart troubles. Oh, health scares. That is the ultimate cop-out. Julia, smelling a lie, called the hospital, posing as Nelson's daughter, and was told that he wasn't currently a patient. Rachel said that when she later spoke with Nelson. She explained that of course there had been no record of him. He had been on a VIP floor, because they always have an explanation for everything. A very compelling explanation that, well, that must be it, right? After a month had gone by, Rachel paid Julia back herself. But this didn't assuage Julia's suspicions. Who was this guy, supposedly rich but obviously strapped for cash, who was borrowing large sums of money and trying to get her money to invest in Connecticut real estate? It doesn't make sense at all. And only Julia could see that, the daughter could see that, because the mother, Rachel, was infatuated by him. And she could not see through the bill. Nelson Roth, Julia said to me when I was passing through town that fall, is the fakest fucking name I've ever heard. Now, we already seen the whole of Rachel's story. Before we get to Christy's story, and this is going to be much shorter, we have to make a summary of these steps or these tactics that these personalities use to manipulate you. The first one is the love bombing. You feel overwhelmed about all this attention and affection. The people are impeccable. The man is impeccable in every single way. The way they dress, their manners, their attitude, their jokes, their fun. You have the greatest time of your life. Maybe the sex is great too. That is also another possibility. And, well, you feel that you're in cloud nine and there's no reason. All your defenses are dropped, even in the face of inconsistencies and things that make no sense at all. You say, well, he must live a complicated life. And besides that, he is rushing everything in that relationship, from just getting to know each other to even being engaged, as we're going to see in this. In the summer of 2000, Christy, a 49-year-old personal trainer and aspiring writer on the Upper East Side, was in a slump. She had just been dumped by a boyfriend she had been sure she would marry, and on top of that, she was struggling with money. But she was a pick yourself up, dust yourself off kind of woman, so she decided to get dressed up and go out. She called a friend who lived in the neighborhood. "Let's go to Campagnola," Christie suggested, referring to a white tablecloth Italian restaurant frequented by the occasional B-list celebrity. Maybe Meghan Markle could be around. As the women ordered drinks at the bar, Christie met eyes with a handsome man across the room. He wore a brown suit and had a copious head of hair, and he was sipping on a scotch. He was sexy and mysterious looking, he recalled. Yeah, the mystery. The mystery is the most important part. He introduced himself as Nelson Cohn. He was a businessman, he said, and an art dealer. Two sides of the coin. He was funny and lavished attention on Christie. After a while, Christie asked him point blank, was he married? He wasn't. Was he a commitment phobe? He was not, he said, and took a small band he wore and placed it on Christie's ring finger. I think that was a bit risky on his part, but maybe he had already read Christie's body language, the way she engaged with him, and he said, well, let's go for it, and put a small band he was wearing on her ring finger. That is a rush at first sight. The two began dating. Each time they met, Christie recalled, Nelson told her about his various houses, his exciting work, and his travels. This guy didn't even have a passport, they found out. He often mentioned a business partner, Jack, who lived in Europe, where Nelson also had a home. He wanted to take Christie there and to his place in Florida. He said that he wanted to take her shopping. He was very intimate with her, often sharing details about his past. He told her that he had received a Purple Heart from Vietnam and that he occasionally had nightmares involving his memories of the war. Oh my God, this is a con man. Christie had noticed a scar on his abdomen but didn't know how he got it. He didn't offer many details but said that he told her private things about his life because he felt close to her. Another way to make women feel like they are special. He was sweet and deeply romantic, but she learned over time that he could turn on a dime, suddenly screaming at her or cutting her down when he disagreed with her. And for me, this is very important too, because in these moments, you realize that you are in front of the real person who just turns in on you, maybe screams at you publicly, and you feel like, well, what's going on? But somehow, there's no red alert. There are no red flags. But the people around you look at you and say, can't you see what he's doing to you? Somehow, if you are already on his sphere, on his circle, on his this magnetic field that they can build around you, well, that is a big problem. But you have to be very careful about this. Once, she recalled, he set the contents of a skillet on fire while cooking, and when Christie scolded him, he lashed out. And he knew just how to ruin her self-esteem. Pay attention to this. When she showed him a screenplay she was working on, he both encouraged and ridiculed her. Look how easy it was for Sly Stallone, she recalled him saying. Stallone had written Rocky in roughly 4 days. If Christie had been a real writer, Nelson went on, it wouldn't be such a chore for her. You know, this passive-aggressive insults, this passive-aggressive attacks that leave you startled. You don't know what to say, and sometimes they even make sense to you. You enter this mental gymnastics to say, well, what he says is it makes sense to an extent. If I was a writer, if I were a writer, I could write this easier. Why is this so difficult for me? You begin to doubt yourself, and doubting yourself, I told you many times, is the gateway to actual gaslighting. When the person begins to make you doubt not only about your own judgment, but your perception of reality. And that is the most dangerous circumstance that you can find yourself in. Luckily, this guy has been caught. At the end of the summer, Nelson gave Christie an engagement ring. It was much too big for her finger and flopped around as she walked. I'm engaged, she told her friends. Not that I really believe it, she reflected later. I needed a fantasy. And this is important. You have to think about yourself. Think about your emotions. Do you need a fantasy? Is this a fantasy being fulfilled in this relationship? Can you think rationally about this? I know that it can be really hard. And in many ways, it doesn't matter if you are a man or a woman. It can happen to you because these people know how to get you in their hands, metaphorically and physically too. And yes, she also gave money to him. She recalled that he told her she would get 10 times her initial investment in a few days when his deal went through. This didn't happen, but he managed to persuade her to give him more and more money until she was out roughly $5,000. She said that whenever she mustered up the nerve to ask him to repay her, he'd become enraged. So I think we have seen enough from this guy, and all the insights work in many situations. But now if it's your turn, what do you think? How do you think you could have reacted in these situations? Have this happened to you at any point of your lives? I would love to know what do you think about this in the comments. My body language buddies, remember to download my 100 body language tips right in the description of this video.